Welcome to episode 14 of the VADA podcast, and today's guest is a very interesting fellow. Some of you in the audio community will know him from Make Noise Pro, working with Sam. I know him through Make Noise Pro, and I'd like to very much welcome Mr. Lawrence Ethan to the podcast.
Well, thank you.
How are you?
I'm good, yeah.
So I don't think many people know your full story because there's a lot more to you just fixing stuff, even though you are the fixer of all things VADA now. You have no choice. We've kidnapped you. We own your soul. But your story started, I mean, obviously, I know that you worked at East West, but there was still quite a journey up until that point. So what was it Grinder Music, you said, was the first?
Yes, Music Grinder was the first like professional recording studio I had a job at, but I was going over that. Sometime, I'm saying 1985, I was rehearsing with a guy named Greg. He played guitar, I played bass, and we were writing some songs, and we found a place in the neighborhood.
Was this in LA?
Yeah, in the San Fernando Valley, we found a spot called Muse Studios. Muse Studios had a big showcase room and a couple of rehearsal rooms. And we practiced there for a bit, and then I got absorbed into the place because, I don't know, they had a brand new Trident Series 75 console. I don't know anything about gear, and an old Otari or something. But I was like, ooh, recording studio, rehearsal studio, and I just ended up putting cell techs up on the ceiling and hanging around, and ended up being the house sound guy because the other guy got in a fight with the owner, and then by default I was doing the showcase room and setting up everybody's rehearsals, and supposedly it was getting free rehearsal time, but I just ended up doing that stuff and repairing wedges, and so it started a long time ago. And there was a couple of guys that came through there and said, "What are you doing here? You should be in a proper studio. You're a really good assistant." It was like one of the first recording sessions, and I aligned the machine and knew fuck all about it. And then I left. I went to college, went to UPS, left UPS, and I was like, I don't know what to do with my life. And my girlfriend said, "What do you want to do?" I said, I want to be a recording engineer. When truthfully, I wanted to be a rock star. So I just cold called everybody in this studio menu. Somebody had photocopied for me at college. And when I got to MU, I called up, "Hi, my name's Lawrence," and I'd gotten 1,000 hang-ups. It was just day 2 of cold calling all the numbers and getting, this number has been disconnected.
Yeah.
I don't take calls like this, click. Anyway, so I said, I'm looking to be an assistant engineer. And she said, "How'd you know?" And I said, "How'd I know what?" "Well, our runner just quit like 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago. And so there's an opportunity." And so I did 2 interviews there and got the job. And yeah, that was the beginning of my music. They had just gotten finished with Dokken, and they had done Megadeth. And so it was a lot of hard rock because it was a great drum room.
Yeah. And so where from there? Actually going back to the point, that's how I got my first assistant job, by just phoning loads of studios and going, I'll just come and hang out. Let me just come and help. You don't have to pay me or anything like that. And it's the same how Georgia, we discovered Georgia here. She got in touch with us saying are there any jobs going and stuff like that. I think you do have to be pretty proactive because studios, you don't very often see studios kind of advertise for a job, do you? Because there's so many people that want jobs in the studio. I think there's always someone that is hanging around that ends up catching the eye of an owner of a studio or a producer that goes, "Oh, this guy's or this girl's really, really good." And I think that's the best. That's what I would definitely advise young people to be in the vision of the people that count and excel when you're in front of them, if you know what I mean. But where did you go after that? What was the...
Well, I started as runner there, and it was a one-room studio, so I was lucky enough that one of the kids did a session with Michael Wagner and then went with him with the record, but he had other commitments, and so the owners didn't want him back when Michael Wagner realized he couldn't have 2 assistants at the other studio. Oh, I have to pay him? Anyway, so it only took 6 months before I started assisting there. A part of it was because I helped them put in a new console, so I knew where everything was on the patch bay, and when they hired guys in from outside, I, as the runner, spent all my time in the control room making things happen, and it was like, well, why do we have this guy when... Anyway. So I did that, and then I started getting engineering gigs there. And I did so much work in a very short amount of time. It was probably 95-ish where I jettisoned myself from the music industry for, a long list of reasons, not the least of which was, oh yeah, that's right, I'm a songwriter. What am I doing recording records? And so I went and worked at a computer store for a bit doing like reception and accounting, which I thought was funny because, I'm living in my car, driving around going, what am I going to do with my life? And I said, I could dig ditches, I could do it. The only thing I can't do probably is accounting. And so I got a job doing payables and receivables. And I did great at it, go figure. And then I got a call from the former owner of the studio, Music Grinder, and he said, Mick over at Sunset Sound needs somebody to help him wire up panels. So after my job there, I went over to Sunset and started, they were rebuilding Studio 2, so I was wiring up Elcos and panels at night. I don't know how long that lasted until Mick came and he said, I don't know what to do, my night guy quit. And at that point, I really, I had been repairing things because Music Grinder didn't have a tech, so somebody would say, could you tell the tech to fix aux 5 on channel 15? And I'd be like, okay. And then I'd just come in early the next day and fix it and pretend that we had somebody, I guess. Because I wanted the set, it was sort of like I was the king of my own domain in that place.
Right.
I'd been there so long, and I built a new we moved, and I built the new studios and designed them. And so I wore a lot of hats at that place as well, and got a lot out of experience making records. But like I said, they moved, and so I built, they had Vincent Van Huff build rooms, and then Gary said, we need panels made for the studios, so could you do drawings? And then I realized that, well, what's going to terminate on the panels? So I had to build the infrastructure, like we're going to have, okay, we'll have guitar things and headphones, and how are the headphones, So it was a learning on the job, designing recording studio panels. But it was nice because you could design them how you wanted. I had little amp tie lines, so you could plug the head in the control room on the credenza and short patch into a 1/4 inch that would show up in the booth, and then you could have the cabinet out there.
It's an important part. It's an important part of studios. And I remember when I was building this, I spent probably months working out all the possible things that I would need and clever derivatives. And I love that feeling when you get a new wiring idea and you go, I've never seen that in a studio, but I really need that. It's a real kind of victory. How many studios have you kind of probably installed then, do you reckon?
Well, I've done parts of, I don't know, 6 or something like that. And then, I've done a lot of redesign, like at East West, I redesigned Studio 5, their mix room, and put in Asperger's and put in the console and did the integration there. And then I ended up redesigning Studio 1, which was like the untouchable Bill Putnam room, but it sounded like crap. And so I rebuilt the front wall and put the ATCs mounted in the wall instead of hanging by chains, and changed the complexion of that room, which led to about once a year I design a room for somebody who, has a Florida room or a garage or something, and they're a songwriter or a producer, and they have a space they want to make a studio. And so they'll invite me over, and I'll look around, and then something pops into my head, and I go and I make like a pencil drawing of what it's going to look like, and it just sort of happens, and I go, I wonder if this is going to sound good.
Yeah.
But you learn a lot along the way, and if you know anything about audio, which I learned, you kind of can shoot from the hip, and I always know when a project is going well when I go, I have no idea what I'm fucking doing. I swear, seriously, because every time I say that, it comes out golden.
Yeah.
I'm rambling again. So yeah, after that, I worked at Sunset, and I got hired as a technician on staff there, and just pulled out miles of cable that was not terminated on both sides, and I'm just very what's the word?
Fastidious.
Yeah, I was going to say fastidious, but anal retentive.
Okay, yeah.
I'm a Virgo. I don't know. Everything has to be just so.
Yeah.
And if I find a word, where does this go? And then you're like, oh, it doesn't go fucking anywhere. Out. It got to the point where, I could put my feet up on the bench because there was no broken gear and clients were doing really well. Met a lot of great people, it was weird for me because I like being in the room doing the music, so when I had the opportunity to go in and help out, popped into my head, Mike Myers.
Yeah.
He did those...
Austin Powers.
Movies. Yeah. So he was doing the first Austin Powers, and he was working in the studio too at Sunset, and I guess the assistant flaked or something.
What was he doing? ADR?
No, he was just doing soundtrack with Michael Sweet.
Right.
And he's like, I want some music that's like do 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 do. They're doing all that stuff, all the bumper music and background music and the in that style. And so you can imagine Mike Myers he's very alive.
Animated.
Animated, yeah. So I got to participate in that, and that was fun. And I'm still waiting for my credit because there was this one moment where I was patching something. They wanted to try something like a flanger or something, and I said, well, yeah, let's give it a shot for shits and giggles. And he goes, what'd you say? I said, for shits and giggles. And he said, shits and giggles. Okay. And then the next day he came in and he said, that shits and giggles thing, I put that in the script.
Yeah, wicked. You're a scriptwriter as well. I should have introduced you as a scriptwriter.
I never got credit. But yeah, so I worked at Sunset, and then my roommate at the time was a pot dealer, and he sold weed to one of the people who worked at A&M. So I got to know that individual. That individual went over to start to work at Cello, and I bumped into him at AES after I had just gotten back from Europe, and I was like, oh yeah, AES. So I went down there and said, hey, Gary, how are you? Oops. and he said, oh, I'm looking for techs. And I talked to my roommate, and he said his budget for that position was $60,000, and at the time I was making half that. So I went to the interview. I want 65. Well, we can't afford that, but we can only give you 60. So I finally was making money, after this is 2000. So after more than a decade in the music industry, I could finally play golf and eat sushi.
Nice.
That's what it's all about.
I guess so. I mean, that was part of the leaving the engineering thing, because you realize as an engineer and you're working with producers, they're not going home either. It's not like when you ascend through the ranks, you're eventually going to get to the point where you don't have to put in all the hours that you're putting in. You're working 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. If you include commuting time, even more than that. And if records aren't going well, it's you're immersed in the thing. For months, you're just immersed with 5-6 different, people in a dark room for days on end. And
it's strange, isn't it? Because it's like that aspect of the job. You're with these people in a really close quarter scenario, and you're all working on this one artistic project, which draws you very much close as people, and you have this relationship over the period of that project, and then often, after that intense relationship you have with these people, after the record is done, that's it. And it's got that, even though you can kind of really formally bond with these people and have really great relationships, there are people that I've made records with, and I love making the records with, but I've not spoken to them in 15 years. But, you do just kind of make friends. I mean, I do have a lot of friends who I've made records with, and still, 20 years later, I'm still friends with. But it's a very weird aspect to the job, isn't it? That sort of intensity of it. Which is it can be disappointing, because sometimes you think, oh, that's a friendship I'm going to keep hold of, and then you just sort of drift from these people. Yeah,
I mean, it's almost, when you mentioned that, I didn't really think about it until now, that there's almost a trauma.
Yeah.
I remember, because working with the studio, as an assistant, everybody leaves and there's these marks left on the floor where the rack cases were for 3 months. And it's just you and a pile of unwrapped cables, and it's over, and they're gone, and they're going to go on, and they're going to go mix it and then go on tour. But you're, all these relationships, this thing you just, because you have to chameleon first of all.
Yeah.
be into what they're into for whatever amount of time, and then there's a silence that's a little bit, I don't know, disturbing. And then the next morning you have to be in to do some ad date.
Yeah. And you have to
and
completely
move on,
and completely change your personality again. Yeah, it's a really odd transition thing, and it is something I've always noticed, and it's nothing that's really discussed. It's like this unsaid thing that happens, but it is really odd. It's very disorientating, I think. At the end of a record, you go, oh, yeah, I'm going to go back to being me again, or because you as you said, you chameleon. You become that band. You take on all their stuff. I end up, if I'm working for a long period of time with a band, I end up using their terminology, their general chat, their sense of humour. I eat their food. If I'm working with a vegan band, I'll just get into vegan food for a period of time. You kind of do that, don't you?
Sure.
And then it's done and it's gone, and then you go, oh yeah, I need to find me again, which is kind of But you've worked with a lot of producers, obviously, as an engineer over the years.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know who the best experience was, who the best producer you felt working with. And then, of course, I want the juicy, the worst. You don't have to name names if you don't want to.
For some reason, I have a very strong feeling about, I did a record called Bash and Pop, where the band was Bash and Pop, and I think it was called Friday Night is Killing Me, and it was Tommy Stinson. I think he's the bass player of The Replacements. And the producer was a fellow named Don Smith, who's passed on subsequently. And he came in to mix it, which was kind of unusual because we had a Neve 8108 console. I just feel that I learned more about sound and mixing on that session than any session that I worked. It really sticks with me. Things like, it was just like drums, bass, electric guitar, and vocals kind of thing. And the way he would manipulate the sound to fill up the speakers just blew my mind. He was able to make it all sort of fill up the record, and he'd fart around, getting really into just a little bit here on like old tube compressors. I think he brought in his own Fairchilds or something like that, and he'd put it on the bass. And I learned how using a Fairchild or a slower compressor like an LA2 on a bass guitar will change the pocket of the bass. I knew it, helped the dynamic range and everything, but when I saw how he manipulated EQ, which also does phase shifting and limiters to instead, because we didn't have Pro Tools, we couldn't line things up or move things around. So to get the song to feel different, and he would do stuff that I just never could perceive before. Mm-hmm. And the main thing being that I said, man, this sounds fantastic. And he's like, I don't care how it sounds, I just care how it feels. Which is so true about rock music or music in general. It's not about what does it have enough high end? No, it's not that. It's just, does it get you off,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think in the last 10, 15 years, because of the way technology has moved, there is almost like a race for sonics. So I remember, in fact, I remember an A&R guy saying to me, this was back in, I'm going to say it was about 2005, and it's where brick walling had really started happening with and I think it was Owen Morris that started that trend actually. And I remember I don't mix. I've never really liked mixing anyway. And for whatever reason, there were some B-sides. It was some B-sides for a band called Boy Kill Boy. And I ended up having to mix it, which I was a bit nervous about. I didn't feel that I was kind of the guy to mix it, especially as I think Dave Sardi had mixed all of the main part of the record. So I was like, oh my God. And I was sort of fretting about it. And the A&R guy at the time said to me, doesn't matter what it sounds like, just make it loud. Right? And I can remember that day in horror thinking, what? And there is, I think that says it all. There's a lot of the Sonics war, whereas if it's really absolutely at the top and just fully loud and louder than everything else, it's kind of like, oh, that's fine. That's kind of what we're after. And then through that technology as well, I think there's been a lot of clinical sterilization in particularly in rock music. You know, some of this stuff is so pristine, it's almost moving towards almost dance music to a certain degree. And I can be a victim of it as well, you know. Like I love a lot of that production sound, and I love, you know, I remember hearing the Limp Bizkit record that the last one, their last album they did, and I remember hearing that first song, and I put it on in the studio, and sonically, Zach Safini mixed it, and I was just like, oh my God, this is incredible. You know, it just sounds huge. But then I remind myself that you can listen to a White Stripes record, for example, which isn't sonically perfect at all. It's quite honest and raw, but it connects. It still connects. And I think that's a really important thing to recognize, that there are a multitude of ways of getting it to connect. And for me personally, when I'm making records, big part of it for me is, does it connect? You know, there isn't a rule book that it's like, oh, it has to sound like this. It has to be like this. It has to connect. And sometimes that'll be a more raw sound, and then sometimes it'll be a more polished sound. But there's no wrong or right in that, I think. And I think you're right. It is. It's like, feel it. It's how it makes you feel. So who was your worst producer you've ever worked with?
You know, I was thinking about this question, and you know, I was really young when I started, you know, and in some ways I look at that as a detriment, because I didn't realize how talented I was early on. And, you know, at that time you had, you know, the Illuminati of mix engineers and stuff to sort of compete with. You know, you were just a kid, a runt. Suffice it to say, I kind of had respect for everybody that came in. Does that make sense? You know, like, you just, if they did shit that was weird, you just go, oh, you know, you wouldn't be like, what a douche. You know, I wasn't coming from a place of judgment. There were certainly, you know, producers that I had a hard time working with. There was, you know, one record that was called 11 by a band called 11, which was Natasha Schneider and Alan Johannes. This guy plays with Queens of the Stone Age, and, you know, he's just all over the place, but always, like, you know, he's a really fantastic guitar player. And so she played organ. Jack Irons, former drummer of Chili Peppers, apparently, was the drummer. It was like a three-piece, and it was just massive, wonderful record. But Pat McCarthy, I think it was his first production thing, and he was just a dick to me. So I don't think his, you know, I don't think there was a lot of second guessing going on, and so, you know, his insecurities were kind of, you know, there was a lot of drama on that record, you know, me like going, I'm gonna fucking quit this bullshit, you know. And then I remember it might have been a few months after that record, he popped into the studio for one reason or another, and it was so awkward. Like, he was like, "Oh, hi," and he just reached into his pocket and pulled out like a bunch of random bills and put them in my hand, and I was like, "Oh, fucking tip, okay." So, you know, you're cool with me now, Pat, for tipping me.
I've never tipped an engineer. Maybe I should start doing it.
I didn't get a lot of tips. Other kids got tips. I didn't get a lot of tips. I wasn't interested in that. You know, I wasn't. You know, it's a fault, because I've never. Fucking money was never my motivation for being famous. You know, it was really just, once you get into the studio, it's just getting off on the music. You know?
Yeah, right.
Whatever position you're in, whether you're playing the music, whether you're writing the music, whether you're engineering the music, you're assistant engineer, you know, T-boy. You know, the goal is to see how spontaneous and magical the thing can be. You know.
Yeah. No, I never got in it for the money. I mean, I did it when I first. I mean, God, I reckon I was assisting for nearly 2 years without getting paid. I reckon. You know, I just became addicted to that studio magic, that thing of when things go well, you know, and you create something and you sit back, and like this week we were really creative we did a drum session with a band called Lunar Kiss, and we were just really creative and open-minded with the drum kit, and we just started we put drum kits everywhere. We had 3 different drum kits set up. And when we did this one trash drum kit, and all of us just basically got high off the sound immediately when we just crushed it all, made it sound really just dope. Do you know what I mean? And everybody's like, this is the best sound ever. And it's that high that it's like, money can't buy that. Money can't buy that. And then, you know, you just feel so proud of what you've created, and you know that creation is going to kind of live on forever, and you're doing something that's important to you. And then also, you know, when you pull something off and you've got this idea, but then you go to execute the idea, and you know, you always think, well, I reckon my plan is we'll use those mics, we'll compress them like this, we'll put those mics there, and I reckon it's going to sound like that. And that moment when you do all of that, because sometimes it goes, oh, no, this sounds shit. But when you do all the things you thought you were going to do, and you go, yes, this is exactly what I wanted it to do. Brilliant. It's just the best, isn't it, really?
I think that's a big part of engineering that I have trouble conveying when it comes to the best parts of my experience. You know, the first thing is having a goal.
Yeah, a vision.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's a lot. It's like, oh, I want my record to sound good, but you know, if I'll hear a guitar tone in my head, and because I've done so many records, I know it's a Mesa.
Yeah.
You know, and I know it's not a Strat. You know, it's probably a Les Paul through a Mesa that's going to give me that fucking bar chord thing that I hear, so I can narrow it down to that. You know, and then just, you know, and get the mics that, well, I want it muddy, so I'm not going to fucking put a 414 on it or what. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So but you're using the tools to create something that you already know is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if you don't have any vision, then I don't know how, you know, just getting online and listening to somebody tell you how to get a vocal sound or how to get a guitar sound. Do you know what I mean? It's nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, you if you don't have, like, I want this record to feel like, you know, how do I want to feel when I listen to this song? I want to feel a little bit pissed off.
Yeah.
You know, so that guitar, you know, when you hear the tubes, like one of the, sorry to ramble, but for some reason I still like it. And who does, is it Radiohead? Forgive me. You know, who does, you know, I'm a free,
Yeah.
Right? Like, I've always liked that little bit of guitar before the guitar comes in, because it's a real, the jugga,
Yeah.
and it's, you know, I'm like, oh, that's got to be a fucking Marshall fucking blonde head.
I'm sure there's a story about that, you know. I think, and I don't know what
it is.
is.
And they probably didn't mean to have the, you know. And I've heard other things where
I think there is a story like that. It was a happy accident or something like that. Yeah.
You know, and then they recreated it in the second chorus or whatever. But it's so
iconic, isn't it? That
it's awesome.
It is an iconic moment on a record.
You know, because it gives away. It just makes it make sense, that part. You know, instead of that guitar just appearing. And there's other records. You know, like obviously there's some parts on like Zeppelin records and stuff where there's a little bit of feedback that starts before the thing. You know, or kind of gives away the. You know, so it frees up that space to make that guitar even more impactful.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, quirky.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I think in getting the vision is important and having the direction, but also be open-minded enough and allow the workflow to have those happy accidents and those moments of creativity. Like, I think it's an important instinct to sort of develop and build. So I mean, I purposefully done this over the years to try and, it doesn't matter whether it's a half-decent demo on Logic that an artist might do, or it's a phone recording in a practice room, you know, the band playing it. I'm always very keen to be able to forward think to, like, right, I think the drum kit should sound like this. I think the guitars should be like this. As you say, you know, you have that vision early doors. But I think, again, as you pointed out, it's an experience thing. It's like, to build that instinct, to feed that instinct, there has to be loads of knowledge. And that's a cross between playing with all these things, you know, sticking a Les Paul into a Mesa or sticking a Strat into a Marshall. And then also some of those famous records that you love, and you love that guitar tone, to actually know what they were using, you know. And you build all that up as a record listener as well as a record maker. And you put that all in the pot, and that's where you develop that instinct, I think. And whereas I think sometimes, I mean, I've certainly encountered it myself. Occasionally, I've met engineers that just engineer. You know, they don't really listen to records. They're actually more into the science of it. And then I think that's when I think that's when things get a little bit sterile, obviously. It's surprised me over the years how many people that do work in studios on the engineering side of things don't particularly enjoy music and consume music as much as like I certainly would, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with, a fellow named Phil Caffel. He worked, I think he worked with Tom Werman. I did a few records with Tom Werman, and Phil didn't have any like technical expertise. He had a lot of swagger. That was the first thing. You know, he had more swagger than anything else. He drove a Porsche and could talk cars with the producers. And he knew how to make rock record, but he didn't know like whether the EQ came before. You know, he just like patch the thing. It's not working. What's wrong with you? You know. So I've known a lot of engineers that weren't particularly technical, but I've never understood engineers that aren't musicians at all. You know, like one of the assets I feel that I had. I was saying this to Georgia the other day. You know, I did everything I could when I started out to get to the front of the control room, to get on the bolster, you know, and at the time there was tape machines. So if I could tape op and participate, the day went like that, first of all, but you started to be able to produce, you know, or join the production and make decisions. Because, you know, you got a guitar player or a bass player sitting here, and they're doing their parts, and you're listening to the parts and you're punching things in, and you're going, you hear like the second bar of the first chorus is fucked up, but you're gonna let him go, and you're gonna wait and make notes while he plays, and then you're gonna go back and be like, I think we need to listen to the second note, you know, the second part of that chorus, because you kind of rushed it a little bit, and you're giving away the downbeat of the next bar, you know, and then you can punch it in, and you know, I started on bass when I played in rock bands, and I always felt that punching in on a tape recorder, I played with my fingers. Playing bass was perfect practice for punching in on a Studer A800.
Yeah.
Because when you play bass, you put your finger on the string and then you pluck it.
Yeah.
Right? And to punch, you have to, you know, go in before the downbeat, just before the downbeat, not too far, because if there's a guitar carrying over and they're, you know, you got to get the part. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, like, how can you not be a musician and punch accurately, you know?
I have this really elaborate way of dropping in, when obviously it's Pro Tools these days,
right.
But I can't just press 3 like that. I have to go. I think it was Moritz that pointed it out that I do it.
I bet you're very dramatic about it.
I can't, and then I tried to do it like that. I was like, I'll punch in out of time. I have to get the bounce. I don't know where that's come from.
Well, it's probably the same thing. You know that you're doing it, and there's an anticipation in that. In other words, if you're doing that, there's
yeah. But it's really funny. I've become really self-conscious when I do it. So I'm like, oh no, I think I look really stupid now.
Nobody's paying attention to what you're doing, hopefully.
But yeah, well, no, hopefully not. But yeah, so I mean, you've been here since 2024 in the UK.
Yeah.
Moving obviously over from, you're a Californian born and bred, aren't you?
California, yeah, born in Hollywood.
Which is very unusual. Everybody I've met from California is from Missouri or Atlanta or...
Yeah, well, that was always my out when people said, you know, fucking people from LA, they're such assholes. And I said, you know why? Because 90% of the people you meet in LA aren't from LA. Because all the people I know from LA are chill and they fucking surf and they're good people, you know? I'm not trashing on all the immigrants in LA. I'm just saying, you know, just keep in mind that a lot of the people that you meet in LA came from Ohio when they were 21 to be an actor or a rock star, and now they're working at Trader Joe's at 35 and they're bitter and, you know, don't have enough money to get back home or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of those stories in LA. And then there's the vultures that come from elsewhere, and I always hated that, because in the music industry, you would sort of, I was lucky enough to sort of land in the top. You know, there were gold records in the hallways of Music Grinder. You know, like I said, we were working with Donkin, and, you know, I was being put on sessions with bands you had heard of. And then, you know, but if we went out to the Sunset Strip, to the Rainbow or whatever, there was all those, like, mid to low, wannabe people. And so new people would come in, and these wannabe people would, hey, well, you got to hang out with me, and I'll make you a star. You want to see my bedroom? Here, have some drugs. And those people would have a really bad experience when they first got to LA, because they were, being manipulated by other people that had come before them who were just assholes. And, you know what I mean? Like, I see that happening. I mean, they're not from LA, and they're bitter, and they're old, and they're not really anybody, so you should just try to avoid those vultures. I don't know why I'm bringing that up, but...
So, apart from the climate, how would you say the American recording industry differs from the UK?
I haven't... I don't know that because where I operate within the music industry in the UK, I don't know that I've been exposed to enough differences, because I'm sure there's differences in, I know that I was talking with Spike, or he was doing a talk at SSL a few weeks back, and he characterized it how you would expect that. LA is very much a we'll do lunch kind of a place, and I think the way he characterized it was that relationships are a little bit more genuine here. And I get that, because I worked for SSL in Los Angeles for 5 years, surrounded by, expats and dealing with, folks over here. And it took me a while to get used to there's a passive-aggressive thing that goes on. But as you get acclimated to the British passive-aggressive thing, it's not that passive at all.
No.
So if somebody's giving you the brush off, they just don't want to deal with you, and that's it. Whereas
like Lemmy.
Apparently, at least he's sincere.
Exactly.
So if I was going to categorize anything, I think in the music industry, there's probably tighter relationships. It's a small place. The UK. It's unfair to compare, anything in the UK with the US, because the UK is the size of one US state. And I've been trying very carefully to cultivate my relationships well, because if I burn one person, and I've always been this way, it's not like I was an asshole in LA, but I just wouldn't want to have my name go out there. Oh yeah, this guy, he did the thing, or he charged me too much, or whatever, because everybody knows everybody at the end of the day here, and the music business is that way in general,
I think the music industry is pretty small in every country.
Very, very small. Even if you take the UK and put it together with the US, we all know the same engineers, you all know the same records and producers, So
how would you define success in the music industry?
Well, I've had to, that's something that I've had to, I contemplate on a daily basis. As soon as I get out of bed, I have to redefine, what I think successful is for my own sanity. I finally had a decent dream, but I have so many dreams where I go into a studio, and it's hard to explain, but it's just this, I come from like an underlying sense of inadequacy, that's the basis of my home, and so there's always just sort of like shoring that up. And so I have these dreams, where I go into a studio and they ask me to hook something up. I think I had one last night, and the mic cable was like knocking over tea, and where I couldn't, the thing I couldn't get it, or I open up something that I'm supposed to fix because they have a session in 15 minutes, and it's just a bunch of wires, and I know that I need a crimper, and I go looking for a crimper, and I'm like, or I go and I'm like, I want to be part of the band because I'm really a musician, and it's like that, what do they call it? Imposter syndrome or whatever. Like, again, I'm like, well, I'm really I'm a better songwriter, musician, and producer, engineer than I am a tech. But I know I can do the thing, right? You know, there's no risk involved. If somebody brings me something, I've fixed so many fucking things that I can get paid today, pay the rent, you know. And I hate that I check down, you know, sometimes it bugs me and I want to, you know, but I always do this in spurts of like, and I just go crazy and I make an album, you know, and then I'm like, oh, fucking hell, look at that. But success in the music business, success in anything, you know, this is what I always think of is, if you're doing the thing, you know, you don't have to, like, if famous is your idea of success, it isn't always, you know, but
no, I agree.
You can then do that, and you probably will, you know. I mean, but you can be famous by, like, you know, jumping off of this building on TikTok, and now you're famous, you know. But you know, you're famous for 10 minutes, and like, what are you famous for? And you know, I always think, you know, I want to be famous for something that's fucking meaningful, and people, you know, will be, you know, Ralph Waldo Emerson me 100 years from now, you know, like that kind of famous, like
leave a legacy.
Yeah, a legacy
yeah.
thing. But you know, success to me is if you know, want to be a musician. If you're playing music every day, you're successful. Like, fucking how lucky are you? Even if you're like, you know, a bulk of your time, you're making a living as, you know, you play on cruises or, you know, a lot of these guys are like, oh, I fucking hate it because I just do cover dates all the time. But you're playing music for a living, bro. And you're getting better at your instrument. And now, you know, when you go into the studio or you go to write or whatever, you've been playing, you know, yacht rock or whatever, you're getting better at your instrument. You know, I mean, the Beatles probably played a shit ton of covers when they started, right? And got good at their craft.
The Hamburg years.
Yeah, you know, so I just think that, you know, not to get into the whole, like, other people defining success for you is not the answer. In other words, the world defining success.
That's a hard thing now with social media, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know,
well,
you
you know, it's
flick
just
open and it tells you what you should be doing, and you should be succeeding here, and you should be feeling like this, and you should be looking like this.
Yeah, the women with social media and how they should appear, and it's just so sad, you know. It's because I love people, you know, and I just love people. I love human beings. I love who they are, you know. And I never, you know, aside from people that are bitter and like mean-spirited, you know, towards other people, you know, or judge other people in a mean-spirited way, I don't see ugliness in people. Do you know what I mean? Like the what do you call it? The normal definition of ugly, you know, like Lemmy, you know, you could look at him and he's got the mole and the thing, but he wasn't an ugly person.
No.
Except when he told you to fuck off.
No, I love that. He made it. No, I enjoyed that.
But you know what I mean? Like, there's just, it's just, I think people are incredible. And so, you know, anytime I think of somebody thinking less of themselves, you know, Lord knows I do it enough myself that I can empathize, you know, but having, you know, thinking that you're chasing something, you know, and if you can find the thing that you want to chase, that's a success in and of itself. If you find something that makes you get off,
Yeah.
whatever it is, if it's cooking, you know, don't think it's, you know, it's hard to not think it's in this area or that area. You know, like lately I've been cooking a lot, and I fucking love to cook. You know, and if I just ended up being, you know, cooking for myself in the kitchen, you know, for the rest of my life and didn't have to go to work, I'm successful, you know, because I'm enjoying myself, and
exactly.
I'm cutting the things and the fresh vegetables, and I'm going to the different stores to collect the things, and I like that. I'll go on a special mission just to get Chinese chives or whatever, you know. My definition of success is trying to do what you love to do as often as possible, and don't get yourself stuck in a shit job, you know, waiting for someone else to tell you when you're the thing. You know, that if you narrow it down to the music business and a career in the music business, if you love what you're doing currently as a runner, as an assistant, you know, you're golden. People will see that, you know, like I see, you know, people who are successful, the Lady Gagas, they're going, right, and they're doing the thing, and they're not 100% certain, but people will join in when they see somebody who's doing something. You know, it's happened to me when I start, I'm doing a writing thing, and the people are like, oh, can I come and play on your record? Yeah, come on in, play on the record. And all of a sudden, you know, everybody just helps you do, you know, make your vision happen because they see the momentum. I don't know how to explain that, you know.
No, I totally get that.
You know,
I totally get that, and I think it's a healthy thing. It's a healthy thing. I mean, I agree with you on the, you know, in the music industry, it's quite an easy industry to become dissatisfied and to beat yourself up. I mean, I've spoken to so many friends of mine who are producers as well, at like really high level, that still beat themselves up and still have what I call self-doubt o'clock. You know, they have that imposter syndrome. It's so common. And I think it was a while ago that for my own sanity, I needed to define what success was and to kind of be at one with myself. And I kind of whittled it down to be proud of what you're doing at that time in your career. So, I mean, obviously I've had like a 30-year career. There's been all the different stages of it and the different growth periods and the different experience periods. But I've always been happy in each one because I've been proud of what I've been doing at the time. And then again, I think the simplest way of success in the music industry is if you're still doing it, you know, because so many people get spat out, you know, and for whatever reason, sometimes they spit themselves out. You know, the industry can kind of crush people and they go like, I'm out of here, or people just don't want to work with people anymore because for various reasons. And I think, I mean, I'm very grateful for the lengthy career I've had, and the older I get, the more at one I get with it, because I'm beginning to realise that in itself is a success, you know. I started in the music industry when I was like probably 16, 17, and I'm still here,
yeah,
you know.
I mean, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you and a little bit of envy, you know, for where you've put yourself.
That's just my good looks.
Obviously that, but you know, I was watching you work the other day on something, and I was like, you know, he's very skilled at what he's doing, and he likes it, and he's involved in that, and you know, you just got
passion's important, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
to keep it going.
I think that's it. I mean, honestly, I find when I have these conversations, or you know, people will walk in, you know, while I'm to pick up a piece of gear, and the poor bastards have to listen to an hour-long diatribe by me, and I just get really passionate about music and about things, and nothing specific, you know. I don't get particularly passionate about, I think gear is stupid. Like, it's hard to explain. Like, I'm trying to find out where I fit in as far as that goes, but I think passion is the, you know, I'm passionate about music, I'm passionate about people, I'm passionate about, you know, anything I'm involved with, and I don't succeed in anything I'm not passionate about.
Exactly, I don't think anybody does.
I learned that early on, you know, when I was working as a cook or whatever, and I got my 4-track. I saved up enough money to buy my 4-track cassette Porta one. I wasn't interested in going back. I just stopped showing up and started recording music. And then I was like, there's not enough tracks. I keep having to bounce the drums and everything sounds like shit. I need to be in a recording studio with 24 tracks. And so I did that, you know, learned how to do it. And I think that's why, you know, you talk about people getting spit out. I was looking at, you know, I made a list of records and producers, and there's this fellow who produced an Enough's Enough record, Paul Lanny, right? And I really like that record. I worked on a lot of...
Yeah, I was going to ask you to name your 5 most precious records that you've worked on, the ones that you feel most passionate and proud about.
Definitely 11 was a fantastic record. You know, snuck up on me, the Enough's Enough record. I did a couple of things with them. Strength was the name of the album, and it's a really, really strong record. They had a single with a song called, I think, Fly High Michelle, and I kept getting the sophomore records. Like, in other words, there was a huge hit, big record, big album, then they came in to do Strength, and for whatever reason, the label wasn't interested or something, but it's a really strong album. I really enjoy it. The guy, you know, the lead singer was a bit of a weirdo, but that was a good record. Great drummer, you know, and he was all good-looking kid, you know, young kid, great drummer. Things that I really you know, it's weird. I have an affection for, there's a jazz pianist named Dave Grusin, and his brother, who's a mathematician, Don Grusin, came in and did a record, and he built it off of all these sequences that he had done.
I know. There was a band I worked with that they wrote a song based on the Fibonacci sequence. Funnily enough, yeah.
But it was, you know, that was a good record. But you know, mostly because you know it was all great session players that came in to do overdubs. You know, you know, all the percussionists and stuff, and it was always such a breath of fresh air. You know, because you're working with a rock band, and they're coming from pre-production and they're trying to beat the demo, and you know, they do what they do. You know, as a drummer, you know, a drummer for Motorhead or something. But then you have these session guys who come in, and you just put a mic in the vicinity of their rig or their drums, and they can just nail it. You know, the ad dates were funny because, you know, we'd work for, like, I remember Michael Wagner comes in to do, I did a couple of records with him. I don't know if you know who he is, but German guy.
Right.
And it was the first session where we came in on the first day, and he wanted all the preamps. He had these M1 preamps before they were called Millennias sitting out in a stack. And we didn't have enough mic cables to go from the mics to the preamps, and then from the preamps to the tie lines, and from the tie lines to the line inputs, you know. So we set all that shit up on day one, and then we went home. Like, we didn't listen to a single thing. The second day, kick drum, right? Kicks all day on the kick. Didn't sound right. We needed the proper pillow. So third day, you know, and then we'd hit the snare so long that the drum doctor, the guy who rents the drums, would have to, like, by the time we got the snare sound the way we wanted it, he'd have to change the head because we'd been beating on it for so long. And then, like, after you're done tracking that record, Add Music wants to come in and they want to do a thing. 9 a.m., you know, you're all ready to go. Session guys come in. They're doing a 30-second, a 1 minute, and a 2-minute spot. And the engineer comes up and he gets the sounds in like 10 minutes. It sounds fucking amazing. And you're just like, what were we doing? But it's mostly because it was session guys and they knew how to get a sound out, you know. So, and I don't know why I brought that up, but I just thought it was like, are we just jacking ourselves off by spending so much time on drum sounds when, you know? And so I admired the guys who did these ad dates, the engineers. They were real. They were, you know, pretty. They had to be pretty steady, you know, because they wanted to knock these things out. You know? We were, you know, downbeat at 9. Mixed by 5, and everybody goes home.
That's
you know?
pretty.
And really good sounding stuff, and just little overdubs, and all the players could just look at the charts. And these cats would write the songs the night before, you know, and then they'd photocopy their charts and send it and put them out, and then they'd write another ad. It's too bad that's a dead science because you know, people don't go to ad agencies to get jingles written every day now, you know. But yeah, that 11 record was amazing. Didn't know Jack Irons was with the Chili Peppers before that. I worked on, you know, one of the earliest records I worked on was the Red Hot Chili Peppers, you know, and it's worth mentioning working with, what was his name? Michael Beinhorn.
Right.
And to me, he was really young. He seemed like a little bit, and this Chili Peppers record was after Hillel had died. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't know. And they had kicked Jack Irons out. So they got this guy Fishbone from Fishbone. Or Fish from Fishbone. So Fish, the drummer from Fishbone, was playing drums. And they did a few songs at the Music Grinder, you know. And so it was mostly like, and it was the first session where John Frusciante was in. And he was like 16, you know. He was younger than I was, you know. And he had his, like, just haircut on the sides. And he just came in and ripped. You know, and so that was really fun. And I had only heard of the Chili Peppers. A friend of mine played me like Gang of Four and Red Hot Chili Peppers like a few years earlier when they were just super underground, you know.
Yeah.
And they were still underground at the time. You know, this is like before, I think right before Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and they kind of blew up and did Under a Bridge or whatever. But that was cool, you know. I thought that was they were a cool band. you
Yeah.
know. And you were speaking of, you know, making relationships and stuff. You know, I bonded with Flea on that one, you know, and he had just had a kid. Fast forward, fucking, you know, that's when you know you're old, when like 15 years had gone by or more, and they were doing a record at Cello, you know, and you're like, hey man, and they're like, hey, you know, Lord knows I'd put on some weight, you know, probably since I was 20, 21, you know, but then they don't know you.
Yeah.
And you're like, we spent 3 months together. Like I get it. You've seen thousands and thousands of people and thousands of things in your life, you know, and it's happened to me, certainly. People are like, hey, but certainly not as, so there's been a few times where I'm like, remember me, had long hair, skinny guy, we were doing a record, and he's like, oh yeah, well my daughter's going to college now. You expect me to remember that shit?
Yeah.
You know, for me, every record was such a, you know, a big experience that, of course, you're gonna, you know, remember like the guitar sounds and what they used, and you know, and the drugs, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, Lawrence, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been awesome.
I really enjoyed this, and you know, we can do this off camera.
Oh well, we often do.
I can regale you with stories.
Exactly.
Is there any sort of, do we have to sing a song together or anything to wrap this up? I'm so glad we had this time together.
No, we don't have a song, but you've got a patch bay to sort out for me.
See? Oh wow, people always do that. You can edit this in. Eddie Kramer, right? You know Eddie Kramer?
Yeah.
So we're at a function at East West. You know, maybe we're opening Studio 5 or something. Who knows? And, you know, I've had a couple drinks. And Eddie Kramer, you know, he's been around and he knows me at this point. And he goes, oh, you know, hey, this is Eduardo. You know, you know, we're working on these guitar pedals together. And I go, oh, so you designed the pedals and you put your name on them? You know, and that was awkward. And then
how to make friends and influence people.
Right. It was just because I've always thought he was so full of himself, I guess. And then about, you know, 25 minutes later, he's leaving and he's walking down the hallway. And he said, hey, you know, channel 26 in there's fucking up. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
get back
put
in
you in your place.
Put me in my place. That's what that reminded me.
Oh, okay.
You gotta go.
Well, no, I'm not putting you in your place at all. It's been really lovely to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.